video, you will learn about some of the new HTML5 input controls and why you should use them. Here's my basic web form, and it has a name field, which is a text field, an email field, and a text area. If you look at the HTML, the name field is just a text element, but the email field is actually an input type equals email. That is one of the new HTML5 input controls. It tells the browser that this field should be an email address and not just a text box with any text in it. There are lots of new input controls. Here's some of the ones that I find useful, especially for contact forms. I'm going to add a label for a phone number. And then we'll add an input field for that phone number. It's the exact same way you do every other input field. Input type equals, only this time you say telephone or tel. ID equals phone. Now we have a phone number. And then I'm going to add one more. And then the input field, of course, for a URL is type equals URL. You may be asking yourself, what's the point? I mean, if these all act like text fields, then why bother with creating special ones for telephone numbers, email addresses, colors, ranges, numbers, etc.? Well, the fact of the matter is that, for one thing, some browsers display the fields differently when it's a different type of field. You already see this when you use a type of checkbox or radio button. But now you're seeing browsers display things like color pickers for when somebody puts in a color input box, or a range with a slider on it. Those aren't supported in every browser yet, but the fact of the matter is that while they're not supported with the special tools to edit them, they are supported in terms of the form itself. In other words, if a browser comes to the form and doesn't recognize the email type, it just displays a text field, just like you would have in an older form. The other reason you want to use these is because they're good for mobile devices. Email addresses are easier to type in when it's an email field because the field actually changes. Same with URL and phone number. But the final reason is for validation. For one thing, if we switch to the browser, this is the old the form before we did anything, but if we type in here ASDF in the email field and click on Get Your Revenge, it says please enter an email address. That's because HTML5 forms are automatically validating against these fields even when you haven't asked it to. In fact, you have to explicitly ask the form to not validate in order to not validate these fields. So I'm going to add one more thing to a couple of these fields to make it more interesting. I'm going to add the attribute required. And I want the email, name, telephone number, and the text area to all be required. So I'm going to save this document, and this time I'm going to reload my form. And as you can see, there's a few more fields. I didn't change the length or anything on them, so the URL field might look strange because it's so short. But as you can see, I can fill in my name and my email address, but I don't want them to have my email address, so no. What's my phone number? None of your business. I don't have a URL, so I'm going to say don't have. And then I'm going to leave the revenge services blank because I want them to guess. And I'm going to click on Get Your Revenge. First it asks me for a valid email address, and then I'm going to submit it. And I don't have a valid URL, so I'm going to actually leave that blank. And as you can see, when I click on Get Your Revenge, it was validating the field. The only thing it didn't validate was the telephone number. And that's probably because the web browser doesn't support validating the telephone number. That's how you can use the new HTML5 input controls in your web form.